The day America almost became a monarchy. What if the United States had a king instead of a president? It might sound like the plot of an alternate history novel, but in the early 1780s, just as the American colonies had secured independence from Britain, there was a real and serious discussion about crowning George Washington as America's first king. At the time, the United States was a young and fragile collection of states operating under the Articles of Confederation. The Revolutionary War had left the country deeply in debt, politically divided, and lacking a strong centralized government. The people were free from British rule, but that freedom came with chaos and uncertainty. The Continental Congress was weak, unable to enforce laws or collect taxes. Inflation was rampant. Soldiers hadn't been paid. The fear of anarchy loomed large. Many among the political elite began to question whether democracy was truly sustainable. Could America survive without a king? Could a republic really hold together 13 different states with conflicting interests? That's when the idea began to surface. A crown for George Washington? In 1782, a proposal known as the Newburgh Letter was drafted by Colonel Louis Nicola, a well-respected officer in the Continental Army. In this letter, Nicola urged George Washington to consider becoming the monarch of a new American constitutional monarchy. According to Nicola and others who shared his view, only a strong centralized figure could hold the nation together and prevent collapse. They weren't suggesting a return to tyranny, they envisioned a limited monarchy much like Britain's had become after the Glorious Revolution, where the king would reign but not rule. Washington, they believed, had the popularity, military authority, and character to play this role without becoming a dictator. But the idea ran contrary to everything the Revolution had stood for. Envelope Washington's historic response. George Washington's reply was swift and powerful. In a strongly worded letter, he rejected the offer with disgust. He called the idea repugnant and against the principles for which so many had sacrificed their lives. He wrote, "Let me conjure you, then, if you have any regard for your country, banish these thoughts from your mind, and never communicate, as from yourself, or anyone else, a sentiment of the like nature." Washington's rejection of kingship wasn't just a personal decision, it was a defining moment in American history. He demonstrated that true leadership meant stepping away from power, not seizing it. When the war ended, he voluntarily resigned his military command, setting a precedent that has echoed through American democracy ever since. A republic preserved. The monarchy proposal quickly disappeared from serious consideration after Washington's rejection. The United States would go on to adopt the Constitution in 1787, establishing the presidency, not a monarchy, as the executive branch. Washington would become the first president, not the first king. But the moment remains deeply symbolic. At a time when many nations were still ruled by hereditary monarchs, America stood apart, not because it had to, but because its most powerful figure chose not to wear the crown. What if he had said yes? It's impossible to know how history would have changed if George Washington had accepted the crown. Would there have been a royal family of Washingtons? Would the United States have evolved into something more like Britain or France? Would democracy have ever taken hold? What we do know is that in that moment, when one man could have claimed absolute power, he chose restraint. And in doing so, he shaped the identity of a nation.